Tonight's lesson is difficult, but you know this, I've told you this before. I have vowed to teach on a topic when it's easy, and I have also promised that I will teach on topics when it's difficult. Whether that's for the congregation, whether it's one that I may be struggling with. So I ask you tonight, as we deal with what I think is going to be a difficult passage, don't turn me off. Let's struggle through a difficult text to see what the Lord desires of us. We're continuing this series through the Sermon on the Mount. 6 times in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus addresses an old teaching using a phrase like, "You have heard that it was said." As Jesus worked his way through these 6 different topics, it seems he has 2 goals in mind. He said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 20, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." For generations, people had watched, listened, and learned from religious leaders. Jesus exposed them, the errors of their teaching, the hypocrisy, the errors of their living. And Jesus said, when it comes to listening and applying the word of God, remember your goal is to stand right before God and to live right before mankind. So Jesus talked about the importance of righteousness. Jesus also, in this section, really spent some time of clarifying or correcting misteachings. Religious leaders were always concerned with outward appearances. We read about that in Matthew chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 15, chapter 23, and that's just a few of the standout examples. When Jesus addressed murder and adultery, he said that keeping the command of, do not murder, it was more than not taking a life. Jesus pointed to anger. He pointed to the heart issue, the anger that could ultimately lead someone to taking someone's life. When it came to adultery, Jesus pointed at the heart issue, lust, something that would lead someone to sexual immorality. Now, tonight's topic is a tough one. So we're going to go to Matthew chapter 5, begin reading in verse 38 through 42, and then we will unpack that. "You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." So what exactly is our challenge? Well, John MacArthur explained why this topic is so difficult. He said, deep down in the human heart is this retaliatory, get even kind of thing. And in our society, frankly, we make heroes out of the kind of people who take nothing from nobody, who don't stand for any stuff. They are the strong and the tough and the courageous and the macho. And our society looks down on the meek and the non-retaliating, the gentle, the forgiving, the gracious, the merciful person. Look down on them who demand nothing from anybody. We say he's a weakling or a coward. I was trying to analyze why America was so in love with John Wayne and why it was such a tremendous loss to the country to lose him. And I think it was because John Wayne, in a sense, is a national symbol of this crusty, tough, take nothing from nobody kind of folk hero that really symbolizes American attitudes. That's the part of human nature, to not let anybody get away with anything until you've told them or let them know they can't do that to you. That's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot to digest. Let's get to the passage. I'm going to work through it just a little bit at a time, beginning in verse 38. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. Eye for eye and tooth for tooth, it really is one of the oldest teachings in the world. It's found in the Old Testament of the Bible. It's also found in the Code of Hammurabi, who reigned in Babylon around 2200 BC. The law is known as the Lex Talionis, which is often described by using the phrase tit for tat. The phrase means equivalent retaliation. Equivalent retaliation. Eye for eye, it's a phrase that's found in the Old Testament 3 times. The first one is Exodus chapter 21, beginning in verse 23. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. Leviticus chapter 24, verse 19 says, anyone who injures their neighbor is to be injured in the same manner. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The one who has inflicted the injury must suffer the same injury. And then Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 21. Show no pity. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Now, these verses are often quoted by those who are bloodthirsty for revenge. But we have to look deeper to get a proper context and understanding of the phrase. The eye for eye law, it's not a savage or bloodthirsty law. In fact, I will suggest to you it's the opposite. It is the beginning of mercy. The aim of the law was to put a limitation on vengeance, not a license for, but a limitation on vengeance. When people get hurt, they often want to return the pain plus some. William Barclay gives an example of an old tribal feud. He says if a man of one tribe injured a man of another tribe, then at once all the members of the tribe of the injured man were to take vengeance on all the members of the tribe of the man who committed the injury. And the vengeance desired was nothing less than death. This law deliberately limits vengeance. It lays down that only the man who committed the injury must be punished, and his punishment must be no more than the equivalent of the injury he has inflicted and the damage that he has done. Seen against this historical setting, friends, this is not a savage law or a license to vengeance. It is a law of mercy. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, was also seen as a law that prevented vigilantes from administering just any kind of justice that they saw proper. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, it's a verse we all know, but it seems that, maybe the part that we know is only the second half of the verse rather than all of it. Let me read all of it. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Then in Proverbs chapter 20, verse 22, do not say, I'll pay you back for this wrong. Wait for the Lord, and he will avenge you. Proverbs 24, verse 29 says, do not say, I'll do to them as they have done to me. I'll pay them back for what they did. And then Deuteronomy 19 gives instruction that points to the judicial system, rendering the final verdict. In other words, we can't go rogue and just take justice in our own hands. That was not the intent of eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And at the time of Jesus, this is interesting to consider. At the time of Jesus, there is no indication that eye for eye and tooth for tooth was applied literally. Not at the time of Jesus. Repayment may have been in the form of restitution or compensation, but there's no indication that people came along and gouged out someone's eye. And there's good reason for that. Now, consider this. What if the eye that was originally injured lacked proper vision? If the eye of the offender had perfect vision, then the law to limit vengeance would be violated just by going eye for eye. In the judicial system, there was consideration given of the injury, the pain, healing, loss of time, and the indignity that was suffered. Now, remember this also, when we're looking at a difficult passage, we must look at each verse in proper context of the entire Bible. In other words, we cannot make eye for eye, tooth for tooth a statement of vengeance when there is so much in the Bible about mercy. Even in Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. Again, I think about Leviticus 19, verse 18, because we get this part. It's the second part. It's the first part that we struggle with, but we must hear it. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Jesus challenged us to consider how we view retaliation, how we view possessions, time, and money. Let's just walk down that. Jesus challenged how we view retaliation. Matthew chapter 5, verse 39 says, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. Now, I want to encourage you to do something. Take your right hand and just pretend that you slap someone with your open hand. Now, how would you slap the other cheek? That's the scenario of the verse. To slap the other cheek, you would have to backhand that person. And according to Jewish rabbinic teaching, to hit a man with the back of your hand was twice as insulting to him as it was to hit him with the flat of the hand. Again, back to William Barclay, something he has to say on this. So then what Jesus is saying is this: even if a man should direct at you the most deadly and calculated insult, you must on no account retaliate, and you must on no account resent it. Boy, now that's challenging. That's a strong statement. I think the key word here becomes insult. Now that should sound familiar. Jesus addressed that in Matthew chapter 5, verses 10 through 12. It's there that he said, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. Those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. I want you to note the consistency of Jesus' teaching. He was preparing his followers for the inevitable, that they would be insulted, that they would be persecuted, and they would be spoken against. They should not retaliate. In fact, just the opposite. They should rejoice and be glad because of why they were suffering. Now, on to Matthew chapter 5, verse 40, Jesus said, and if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. It's in this verse that Jesus challenges the way we view possessions. You know, a little history goes a long way here. The tunic was a person's inner garment. Even the poorest would likely have a change of clothes. That's why it would be easier to give someone a tunic. Now, the cloak, however, that's a different story. That was the large outer garment, like a coat, as it's called in the NIV, but it also served as a blanket at bedtime. The Old Testament law addressed the importance of that garment in Exodus chapter 22, beginning in verse 26. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it by sunset, because that cloak is the only covering your neighbor has. What else can they sleep in? When they cry out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. By right, a man's cloak should not be taken permanently from him. So this part's difficult. Is Jesus telling us that our mission is more important than our rights? Is Jesus saying that our responsibility as a Christian is more important than our possessions? Yeah, I think that's exactly the point that Jesus is trying to make. In far too many cases, we have given Christian mission and responsibility a back seat when it should be a priority. Matthew 5, verse 41, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, then go with him 2 miles. Here, Jesus challenged the way that we view time. Again, good history lesson here, because this was a sour subject for many Jews. Romans ruled the land, and Jews had limited freedom. But a Roman soldier could come along and require you to carry their belongings for 1 mile. So picture, if you will, landowners going and marking off 1 mile in each distance from their house. If the soldier came along, you didn't have a choice. You had to. But you didn't have to enjoy it. You could almost count the mile by the step. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Man, drop that bag on the ground and head back home. No need for pleasantries. You did what was required of you, and that was all you were going to do. So what Jesus pictures is this scenario of, imagine the soldier's reaction if he was met with a smile. Hey, let me carry that for you. So down the road you go, you're smiling the whole time. Soldier knew that mile marker was coming up, and he would expect to take up his bag, but not this time. You just keep walking. Soldier might even say, hey, you know you don't have to go past that 1 mile marker. You don't have to carry my bag any farther. Oh, that's okay. I'd like to do this for you today. How do you think the soldier would react to that? See, that's the point. The way we handle retaliation, viewed our possessions, handled our time, it said something about the person who had been changed by Jesus. Then finally to Matthew 5, verse 42, give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Many of us may be looking for a loophole because why Jesus talked about this. He challenged the way that we view money. Don't be tight-fisted. I want to review the Old Testament law. This is from Deuteronomy 15, beginning in verse 7. Now, listen carefully to this. If anyone is poor among your fellow Israelites in any of the towns of the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward them. Rather, be open-handed and freely lend them whatever they need. Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought. The seventh year, the year for canceling debts, is near, so that you will not show ill will toward the needy among your fellow Israelites and give them nothing. They may then appeal to the Lord against you, and you will be found guilty of sin. Give generously to them, and do so without a grudging heart. Then, because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to. There will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward your fellow Israelites who are poor and needy in your land. The problem was debts were forgiven every 7 years. So if it was getting near the seventh year, well, you might not want to help someone because any loan might not get paid back or not get paid back fully. So Jesus' challenge here is don't let that be the basis of helping or not helping someone. If the need is there, be a blessing. And we know this from the rest of Scripture that we don't want to feed a problem. In this case, it might be laziness. We don't want to feed a problem. We want to help. We want to bless people. Now, if we haven't addressed enough tonight, one final challenge. This is from author Oswald Sanders. He says, if I work for God because I know it brings me the good opinion of those whose good opinion I wish to have, I am a Pharisee. If I love Jesus Christ, I will serve humanity, though men and women treat me like a doormat. So I want to work for the Lord, I think is what he's saying. I want to work for the Lord. I want to serve the Lord. I want to do it for the right reasons. I want to do it because it's what God would have me to do. I want to do it because I really do want to try to help and to bless other people. And tough teaching, maybe not necessarily tough to understand. The historical elements really help provide some understanding in this passage. I think it's the part where we have to live it out that really becomes the challenge. But let's not shy away from the difficult passages. Those may be the ones that when we decide that we're going to look at that and we're really going to not just listen to the word and so deceive ourselves, do what it says, that we will really be challenged to live our life for the Lord so that we live rightly, we stand right, righteous lives right before the Lord and living right before others.